Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Well, as Chris Collinsworth said in the middle of the fourth quarter, man, I love playoff level football. That was fun. The Bills, 4th straight division championship. Are they the new Patriots? Finding a way, take down Miami, who felt like they had led the division for the last several months, and now have to go on the road. And I think Field Yates tweeted frigid conditions in Kansas City. So we'll dive into the game. I mean, probably game of the day. Just on the edge of your seat from the early interceptions. Tua started out, then Josh threw a couple, then he had the fumble. Then the punt return kind of changed the game. That was a fantastic winner wins the division Sunday night football game, week 18. So we will dive into that. We know the matchups now. I'll just give my initial thoughts. Arthur Smith, have a take that a lot of people have been hitting me up in my DMs. Like, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? He attacks Dennis Allen at the 50-yard line, pissed off that they scored up 41-17. By the time you're watching or listening to this, Arthur Smith might not even be employed. So maybe he was extra mad. And then the Jags and Trevor Lawrence. The Jags have a Trevor Lawrence problem. King Henry, which he sure looks like played his last game in Tennessee, went for $150. Pretty cool moment. So a couple quick thoughts there. And the game plan will be, I'll be with Colin tomorrow after the national championship. We will have a podcast tomorrow as well on anyone that may lose their job. So Black Monday is January 8th. So I almost said excited. I'm not necessarily excited. From a content standpoint, I am, but not rooting for anyone to lose their gig, but it's part of the business. Happened to me. So a lot of football coming up. But first, here's the deal. I need you to go to your app store. Whether you have an iPhone, whether you have an iPad, wherever you get your applications. And I need you to download a little thing. It's called Gametime, the official ticketing app of this podcast. Do you want to go to one of these playoff games? I have been probably to 4 or 5 playoff games in my life and a Super Bowl, and there's just nothing quite like, the Super Bowl is a little more corporate, which is really fun, especially if your team's there. The one Super Bowl I went to, it was the Broncos versus the Panthers. I wasn't rooting for either, though I had a lot of money on the Broncos, so I kind of was. But I've been to Niner playoff games. I've been to the Eagle playoff game, and there's something pretty special. So if you get the opportunity, if you live and your team is hosting one of these playoff games, or your team is going on the road and playing in one of these playoff games, I highly recommend it. It's just, it's basically Game 7. It's the NCAA tournament. Survive, advance. The tension is palpable. But I need you to go to Gametime and search those tickets. And when you buy a pair of tickets, promo code John, $20 off. In these inflationary times, though, inflation, they say it's going down, but you go to the grocery store, you don't quite see it, but you got to want to save some money. $20 off, buy a pair of tickets, Gametime, promo code John. That was a football game because it felt the tension of that game, how stressed both coaches look, like the team that lost that game was going to go home and their season was over. Like, if you didn't know, if you weren't a serious football fan and you didn't have all the scenarios, and I just told you as you were sitting on the couch, you had it on mute, whoever loses this game is going to go home, you would have felt that. It was palpable from the television. And let's face it, let's start with the Bills. Because there was a moment this season when Ty Dunn, who I've known for a while, I like Ty Dunn. He wrote an article that would have been the definitive piece if the Bills would have imploded. Because at the time, I think they were like 7-6. Maybe they were 6-6. It was not going well. They were firing Ken Dorsey. They were circling the drain. They were looking like a team who was likely, to go 8-9 or 9-8 or just miss the playoffs. And since then, they won 5 straight. And now they're 11-6. Think about this. The Philadelphia Eagles once upon a time were 10-1. The Buffalo Bills once upon a time were 6-6. They ended up with the same record. They're both 11-6. The difference is the Eagles are the 5 seed and the Bills are the 2 seed. So basically, if they, who they play, they beat the Steelers, and we'll find out on TJ Watt. They're getting another home game, 2 home games in Buffalo, pretty big deal. So I mean, what an incredible midseason turnaround by the boys in Buffalo, starting with Sean McDermott. Because after the article came out about the 9/11 pregame speech, even though it was from years ago, a huge part of that article was him just being super tight. You can see it on his face a little bit. But here's the one thing I like. In football, even when you're a great player, you have to play under control. And the one Collinsworth was comparing Favre to Josh Allen. Well, Favre post-Holmgren was a major roller coaster. He wasn't exactly Mr. MVP. Still a great player at times, but it was hard to count on the guy. Why? Because as Collinsworth said, he had 5 interceptions and he still threw another because there was no containing him. And Josh Allen in the first half was insanely reckless. Multiple red zone interceptions. The play at the end of the half when he throws it over the middle where the guy catches it like the 3 or 4 yard line and gets crushed at the 1 yard line and time runs out. And Sean McDermott just said that's unacceptable. That is not okay. That is reckless. That's losing football. You wouldn't get that in basketball. You wouldn't treat the $250 million player like that because optically you're not allowed to, even though we're all watching it. And Sean McDermott crushed him at halftime on a sideline interview. And you know what I said? Love it. Because we're all watching it. It's crumbling in front of our eyes. And this used to happen with Russell Wilson in Seattle. Everyone just went against Pete, right? Post LOB, everyone just called Pete the village idiot, let Russ cook. The problem is you can't just depend on that level of play. And Josh Allen is a version like Russ times 5 because of his physicality as a runner. And he's much more reckless with the football. That's why he is compared to Favre sometimes, right? But he's built more like John Elway. And I thought in that first half, I'm like, the Bills are going to lose this game. And the big reason is going to be Josh Allen. And it sucks because I love the guy. I enjoy watching him. And then in the second half, once they had that punt return, it was on like Donkey Kong, and that guy took over. And he had a run in that game that looked like Cam Newton on the play where they called the defensive holding to Jalen Ramsey. But part of football, unlike these other sports, is you need your head coach to be on your best player. Because your best player can play out of control. And in the sport of football, you get 1 game. You don't get 7-game series. I don't get to make an error in the 3rd inning and have it not cost us. If I throw a bad pick in the red zone, that might lose us the game. This was not some 35-30 shootout. This was a game that, honestly, once it got to 14-14, you're like, 3 points might decide this thing. It was, both sides had a ton of dudes in the injury tent, in the locker room. They were losing guys. They were just dropping like flies. So the holding on to that football, honestly, what saved them is those turnovers happened in the first half. Because if that happens in the second half, they lose the game. You can't overcome that. So sometimes, in a weird way, turning the ball over, even if it is an incredibly stupid turnover, as those interceptions were, it's easier to overcome it if it happens in the first quarter than if it happens in the 3rd or the 4th. But you could tell Sean was hot. And Sean took a lot of shit this year. Like, Sean's clearly pretty good at his job, right? He just is. Now, he's a defensive coach. Can he get a little tight? Even the 4th down play call, where there's nothing like trying to do the tush push that only the Eagles can pull off, and everyone attempts to copy it. Even if you have Josh Allen, who probably combined with Jalen has to be one of the stronger, more powerful guys at the position in the NFL. It didn't look like he got it. Maybe he got it. They blew the whistle for forward progress. But here's what I do know is the officiating crew had absolutely no clue where to spot it. Now, it looked like they kind of got it right, but completely guessing. I mean, just pulling out of their ass. Yeah, right here's cool. I mean, this is for the division on the line. You got McDaniel and Fangio over there, their heart just beating out of their chest, and the ref's like, oh, just put it right here. You're like, what? This is crazy. That is one crazy element of the sport, is on the short yardage situations when there is, I don't even know how many pounds of human between the 5 offensive linemen, between all the defensive linemen, the linebackers, the quarterback. No one can see anything. It's like, let's just maybe here. even the play before, the details when it comes to officiating. If you and I, in our given jobs, were as poor with the details as the officials in the National Football League, we'd all be on the streets. We'd all be in the gutter because there was a play a couple before the fourth down where Josh Allen, they run a quarterback like power sweep. He's smart enough to realize I can't go out of bounds. He goes down. The problem was his hand touched the white. The clock should have stopped, but is no one fucking paying attention? Like, isn't that your job to watch the sideline? No one paying attention. Now, you could argue the Dolphins in a position they don't have any timeout, so they can't challenge it. So part of it's on the Dolphins. Anytime late in the game, you are in a spot where you can't challenge because you have no timeouts with under 4 minutes left, that is on your operation. So they deserve some criticism there. But, like, it shouldn't be their fault that the refs miss a guy touching out of bounds. But tonight wasn't about the refs because Josh Allen contained himself in the second half. I would imagine Sean McDermott got on him at halftime. And then defensively, I'm going to read you the sequence in the second half for the Dolphins because all I hear is how great this offense is. And listen, for a lot of games this year, they've scored a lot of points. They've scored a lot of touchdowns. They've moved, they've accumulated a lot of yards. But when it really mattered for all the fucking marbles, because I got news for you. This team is not going on the road to Kansas City. I don't care if Brett Veach is playing wide receiver. He played at Delaware for Patrick Mahomes. The stat speaks for itself. They haven't won a game in under like 40 degrees in decades. I was just out eating dinner, watching the fourth quarter with my girlfriend, and I kind of told her that stat. I'm like, they better win this game because they are not going on the road. She's like, well, why not? I'm like, because they have to go on the road to cold weather places, and this franchise doesn't do it. She's like, oh, it makes total sense. How in Miami are you going to prepare to play in all those cold weather cities? Hint, you don't. Well, here's what they did in the second half. 3 plays, 9 yards, punt. 4 plays, 11 yards, punt. That's the one they took to the house tying the game. 3 plays, 1 yard, punt. 3 plays, 3 yards, punt. And then the last series, he threw a pick. And he easily could have thrown a pick a couple plays. Here's what I will say about Tua. He is better than I thought he would be. Last year, I thought he was closer to a below average player. He's solid. He really is solid. But tonight, you saw the difference of an absolute thoroughbred who can drive you nuts, who can be reckless, but who is a $250 million player. And then you saw Tua, who's pretty good. And so, he made some really nice passes that Tyreek uncharacteristically dropped. Because I was thinking tonight, I would argue this. I think he's the third best wide receiver I've ever seen. Now, the argument tonight with the drops, probably not in my favor. But I don't think there's ever been a guy, beside Randy Moss, no one's gone deep better. and I don't think, I mean, how many guys beside like Jerry Rice, Marvin Harris, it's a short list, Antonio Brown is prime, that could get open with ease. Any route. Go routes, hitch routes, ins, outs, comebacks, deep outs, you name it. I mean, wheel routes, put him in the backfield. He wants to get open. He can get open on every single play. Now, he put some balls on the ground, and it cost him. But ultimately, Tua, if the play isn't schemed perfectly, and Tyreek, who is truly, in my opinion, he's the third best wide receiver I've ever seen. Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, him. I'd have him above Terrell Owens because it seems like, this guy is a consistent winner. Terrell Owens drove everyone nuts. And you could say, like, Tyreek might look at me like, wait, you're putting Randy over me? How many championships that guy have? Let's never forget. I helped win one, and I, like him, one of the greatest offenses ever. So was I. Remember watching me play? So, like, he'd have an argument. His career does not look like he's slowing down. But the one thing with Tua is that ball floats. And anytime your ball floats, and that's Miami, where the weather tonight clearly wasn't that bad. What do you think happened when that floats in freezing temperatures and when the wind's blowing? It's just going to be very difficult to win. Now, I'm not acting like I would get rid of Tua, but it just, when I read people saying that, like, oh, you just got to pay him what? Pay him what? That's my question. Like, can I give him $30 million a year? Like, if I got to give the Jalen Hurts contract, which, let's face it, a lot of people are like, are we cool with this? Is this all right? Are we sure? And I like Jalen. And I would take Jalen over Tua every day of the week and twice on Sundays. But let's face it, this last couple months, whether he's hurt, knee, now he's got dislocated fingers, it's just, I promise you, no one's told me this, but Howie and Jeffrey don't sleep perfectly every night knowing that Jalen Hurts contract right now. They're hoping it is okay. No one hopes with Josh Allen. No one hopes with Patrick Mahomes. They would sign that every single day of the week. Even after those picks, we're fine. Josh's going to be all right. He's going to figure it out. You just don't think that with Tua. And to me, like, listen, Vic Fangio is an elite defensive coordinator. Miami is now a well-run operation, a lot like the Bills. Forever with Belichick and Brady. Listen, it went viral probably a couple months ago when Brady made those comments about the NFL not being as tough as it once was, right? It just maybe, I forget the exact word and verbiage he used, but basically like the play's never been worse. Just kind of talking shit about today's NFL. And Alex Smith chimed back immediately and was like, yeah, your division really sucked. And it was like, well, Alex, I watched them play you a lot. I watched them play everyone else who was good. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Denver with Peyton, Indy with Peyton, and beat them all consistently. Now, the one thing they benefited a lot from is Miami, Buffalo, and obviously the Jets for the totality of Brady and Belichick's time together was pretty consistently inept and not well run. Now Buffalo is really well run. Now Miami looks really well run. The difference, though, of the two franchises, because listen, Sean McDermott's proven to be a really good coach. Mike McDaniel, through 2 years, proven to be a really good coach. The quarterback is kind of the separator. We talked about it last night on the pod. Listen, I think DeMeco's a rocket ship. I was with the Eagles when we traded for him after he tore his Achilles. He was never the same as a player. But a huge reason we traded for him was the character, the leadership, just the total package. And if he wanted to coach, like he was going to become what he became. He turned out to be a coach, and look what he is. But DeMeco with an average quarterback is not in the playoffs. To be a good coach, like, listen, Phil Jackson's an awesome coach, but without Kobe, Shaq, and Michael, I'm sorry. If I give him a couple random NBA players, he ain't winning championships, right? Bill Walsh needed Joe Montana. Belichick needed Brady. It's the way the sport works. And to me, McDaniel, there is a ceiling on what they're doing as long as they're with Tua. The problem is they're in the spot where he's good enough that you can't just randomly replace him, so you're kind of stuck with him. But now we're talking money. And, you saw Burrow, you saw Herbert get extended. He proved he could be durable, and he definitely proved that he could be good enough to get you back to the playoffs. But part of the reason Jalen got a lot is he outdueled Mahomes in the Super Bowl, right? He won multiple playoff games. What's going to happen when you're one and done in Kansas City and you lose like 13-6 in negative 10 degrees, right? So I think the Dolphins have a problem when it comes to their quarterback. Now, you could argue it's a first-class problem. It's a good problem because they can still win with it. But in football, this is a business. This isn't pee-wees. We're not playing fantasy like contracts end. This is real life. You get a contract. 4 years, you pick up a fifth-year option. Well, this is his fourth year. Next year's a fifth-year option. Ideally, you don't want to play guys on a fifth-year option because it's all guaranteed. It all hits your cap the same. It's why you extend guys. So you can, basically manipulate the money on the books. When you franchise a guy or they play on the fifth-year option, there's no manipulating the books. If the number is 28 million or 32 million or 18 million, that's the number on the books, right? A lot of guys signed like, oh, so-and-so signed for, $120 million. And then like, what's his cap hit? Oh, it's $11 million this year, right? It's why the franchise tag, a lot of teams attempt to avoid it at all costs because you don't want to carry a big number for a player, especially when it's a quarterback on your salary cap because nothing you can do about it. The number's the number. If it's 30 million, it's 30 million. Like, look around a lot of these quarterbacks right now. I bet their cap hits aren't $30 million, even if they have huge money. Deshaun Watson signed for $230 million, all guaranteed. His cap hit this year was $19 million. So the Tua thing becomes complicated moving forward, and I don't like him at all this week. And props to the Bills. And this is the thing about football. I say it all the time. Most of our jobs, right? You're just kind of worried about you. You're kind of worried about you, whether you work in an office setting, no matter what you do, right? Even if, as the team does well, as the company does well, but you're really just focused on yourself. Football is the ultimate team sport. So even if you are focused on your production and doing your job, it's about the totality of the group. And it's why it's so easy to insulate yourself if you do all like each other and you do have the talent when crazy shit happens. And that article was pretty crazy. I mean, it talked a lot of shit about it from a lot of people. I mean, it wasn't, Ty Dunn's not making this stuff up, but they rallied around him. If they didn't like the guy, they would have gone the other way. But they just rattled off win after win after win after win after win. And now they're fucking hosting back-to-back playoff games if they handle business, which I expect them to do against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Throw down on big matchups with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on the NFL and score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download DraftKings Sportsbook now with code JOHN. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL action to score $150 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. John, the crown is yours. And let's talk about that a little bit. I'll just fly through the wild card games. The wild card weekend, or they're calling it like forget the name, crazy wild card weekend or super wild card weekend. It's just wild card weekend. Cleveland at Houston. Like I said, Houston's an amazing story. They've had an awesome year, and CJ Stroud and D'Amico, if they were a stock, I would find a way to bet six figures on them right now. But I think it ends, and I think they lose. And I think Cleveland is a tough matchup because defensively, Jim Schwartz, the physicality, it's a little different animal than Indy, who, I got news for you, their defense sucks. So I like Cleveland in that spot. Now, the wild card is Flacco. Flacco's had a remarkable year, and his comeback story is if DeMar hadn't taken on death and beaten it, literally overcame death, Flacco wouldn't win the comeback award. They might rename it Joe Flacco. It's one of the great comeback stories I've ever seen. 38, 39 years old, hadn't been good for 5 years, was on the fucking couch, was taking his kids to school every day, played in the league last year, so it wasn't like he'd been out of the league a couple years, was literally on the Jets, looked terrible. A couple years ago was on the Broncos, looked terrible, looked awful. And he comes in, he's just throwing touchdowns after touchdowns, leading a team that was about to implode because of all the quarterback injuries to the playoffs easily, where even in week 18, they didn't even have to try. So you never know. Maybe he has a clunker in him. If he has a clunker, CJ's rolling, maybe they could pull an upset because I think the Browns are favored, but it's like -1.5. But I think I like Cleveland in that spot. Miami at Kansas City. I couldn't like Kansas City anymore in this spot. I don't care how crappy their wide receivers are. I don't care how weird this season has been. Kansas City is not losing at home in freezing temperatures to Mike McDaniel and Tua. This offense isn't set up to go in that environment. So I'm shorting the Dolphins hard in that spot. I love the Chiefs this weekend. Bills at the Steelers. As of recording this, I don't know TJ Watt's status. I think it's fair to assume he will attempt to play if he's able to move around. Obviously, when you sprain your MCL, it's a problem. So, I mean, obviously, there's a good chance he doesn't play. I said it from the jump. The Steelers never should have been in that position. They should have been in a position that TJ didn't even need to dress. Now, obviously, they had to win to just give themselves a chance. And then today, the Titans took care of business. But I think the Steelers, a lot like the Dolphins, are one and adios. It's been fun. See you later. Green Bay at Dallas. This is the ratings bonanza. I mean, these are obviously the Cowboys are the biggest brand. Packers are a top 5 brand. I think Packers are about to run into a buzzsaw. And as I told Colin earlier today, Jordan Love is sweet. Jordan Love is so much better than I ever thought he could be after he had like his first good game. Obviously, early on in the season, I probably talked a lot of shit. He was terrible. Well, he hadn't played, and I probably jumped the gun, but it's football. You can only give an opinion based on the games you see. The second half of the season, that kid has fucking been awesome. He has looked like a top 10 NFL quarterback. Today, what he did to I love the Packers this weekend. One, Justin Fields can't throw from within the pocket. He's thrown 5 touchdowns since the middle of November. Everyone given, the anointing the Bears. It's like, have you seen who they're playing? One, and offensively, are you guys out of your mind? This guy's not going to be on the team next year. I bet on them simply because, one, it was in Green Bay, and two, I just thought the Packers had a huge quarterback advantage, and it was on full display today. Now, I think the Packers are going to run out of magic here. I think this is a tough matchup. In the Dome, obviously the Cowboys play better there. I think Dallas lights them up because I don't think the Packers have any chance to stop them. I do expect Jordan Love to make a couple plays. If I had to make an early prediction, 35-20. Rams at Detroit. I got to know who's healthy for Detroit. That's my first take because every time I looked up today and I had them in one of the boxes because their game didn't matter. Dan Campbell thought it mattered. They looked like they were losing a guy every other play. Even the guys they didn't necessarily lose, like St. Brown's, crutching off the field. So I'm not just going to pick the Rams yet because I think a lot of people are, but I understand leaning that way. I do think everyone wants to pick against the Eagles. And I think this, because the Eagles were playing so shitty, they threw them on Monday night because ideally you would not want to play on Monday Night Football. But the Eagles don't deserve to play anywhere that they want to play. And I think Nick Sirianni is in major trouble. And I've been saying this from the jump. I told Colin this. I believe this to my core. I am not looking for a CEO in the NFL who is 40 years old. I'm hiring you, one, because I think you can evolve as the leader of the entire team if you've never been a head coach, and most young coaches have never done that, but because you have an expertise. I watched Matt LaFleur this season, especially the second half, call plays with his young quarterback and go, you know what Matt does? He impacts every freaking game. I watched Eberflus have to fire his buddy because who knows what happened, take over the defense. They trade for Montez Sweat, and you go, you know what? Is Eberflus some great head coach? No clue. But is he a good defensive coordinator? Yeah, he is. I watched Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan with backup quarterbacks today to call plays against each other. I like my young coaches to call plays. I don't even think that's too much to ask. Why am I hiring you? To lead the group? If I wanted a leader, I'd go ask Warren Buffett if he has a good leader. I'd go hire a bunch of coordinators. I just do not know what Nick Sirianni does. No freaking clue. None. Someone DM'd me the other day. He's like, you threw out he's kind of like Tomlin or Harbaugh in terms of just leading the crew. It's criminal to compare him to those two guys who have both been doing it for a combined 30 plus years. Is Nick Sirianni some great motivator? Because sure as hell doesn't look like it right now. And I got nothing against him. I'm not trying to crush him. This isn't personal, right? I just don't know what he's doing. If I was Jeffrey Lurie, what's going on here? Because I watched the offensive coordinator, which is his side of the ball, go to Indy, and him and Gardner Minshew won 2 less games than us. And if it wasn't for the running back dropping the ball, they would have lost 1 less game than us. So the Colts team, and I understand divisions and the Eagles schedule. Listen, I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but the point of the story is you're telling me that Colts team was 1 drop pass potentially away from 10 wins, and we just won fucking 11? I got a $250 million quarterback. I have the best offensive line in football. I got weapons everywhere. I got a high-priced defensive line with a bunch of high draft picks. What is going on? The Eagles have to... Listen, I've been in that building. Tensions are going to be high this week. High. Now, I don't think Tampa could beat them because Baker Mayfield's limping around. I don't think Tampa's any good. The crazy thing is the best team in that division right now is the Saints. If the Saints were going into the playoffs, they would have more momentum. It's harder to win in New Orleans. We saw Tampa last year. I guess this team is better, but, the Cowboys went in there. Now, the Cowboys, that version of the Cowboys was better than this version currently of the Eagles, but won that game 75-10. Remember, Dak threw 10 touchdowns. Had the best game of his career. This game could be tighter. This game get weird. In any game right now the Eagles play, they can lose. There's no way around that. Any game the Philadelphia Eagles play, they can lose. And honestly, you're not shocked when they're losing the game. I was a little shocked today when it got to 24-0. But when it was 7-0, it's I could see the Eagles being in for a game. Even when it was 14-0, you're I could see this. Maybe it was 17-0. I forget the score sequence. Once it got to 24-0, I thought, this is kind of crazy. Are they just legitimately not even trying? Completely mailing it in? Don't cowardice. Watch football all day today. Most teams playing pretty hard, giving it their all, trying. Watch the Ravens yesterday. Think about this. The Ravens against a divisional rival, against a team they hate. Eagles and the Giants hate each other. Ravens and the Steelers really hate each other. Ravens, bunch of backups. You know what they do to the Steelers? We're going to give you all you can handle. We're going to play. You know why? Because organizationally, we hold ourselves to high standards. Organizationally, when we play a game, whether it's Lamar Jackson, whether it's Ray Lewis, or whether it's some practice squad guy that gets elevated that most fans have never heard of that played at some Division I AA school, that guy is going to be tasked with playing his balls off and doing everything humanly possible to win the game. And then you watch Sirianni's team today, you're like, what is going on? This is an embarrassment. And I'd understand like if they had nothing to play for, but at the time, early on in the Cowboy game, they were down like 10-7. Hey, Dallas, you guys don't need to try either. The Eagles are done. Wave the white flag. So I just got the Sirianni situation. You lose to Tampa, it's all on the table. That's all I'd say. He loses to Tampa, and he's lost. Let's see, they were 10-1, and now they're 11-6. So he's 1-5 in his last 6 games. He would go 1-6 in his last 7 games, and losing the first round to Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield. I'd say he'd be in some trouble. And another guy who's in trouble, and by the time you're listening or watching this, might be relieved of his duties. I thought today was an embarrassment for Arthur Smith. I understand in Pee-wees, in high school football, when you're trying to influence people under 18 and help give them life lessons, even though it wouldn't bother me, I get it. High school coaches, you don't want to run up the score, the discrepancy of talent sometimes. But in Division I football, and definitely in the sport where everyone is paid, a lot of guys paid enormous sums of money, there is no such thing as running up the score. It does not exist. So even though they went to a victory formation and Jameis in the huddle decided to get Jamal Williams a touchdown, his first of the year, I don't care. It should not piss you off. Because as Jameis said, listen, guys, we were up 41-17. 41-17. And for Arthur Smith to go to Dennis Allen, and honestly, kind of pisses me off that Dennis Allen apologized. Even if deep down he was mad at Jameis, I would have told Arthur Smith, kiss my ass. You know why Arthur Smith's really mad? One, he's coaching for his job. And two, Dennis Allen and Derek Carr just curb stomped him in front of Arthur Blank, who's over 80, doesn't have that much time left, has to know his job's in major trouble. I liked Arthur Smith when he was in Tennessee. I remember that stretch of football where they went on the road to New England and they went on the road to Baltimore and they beat the shit out of Harbaugh and Bill Belichick. Ended the Tom Brady era. Was an excellent offensive coordinator. As a head coach, it's been really bad. And sometimes, listen, his dad created FedEx from nothing. His dad is an elite CEO. You know what Arthur Smith is? Just a good number 2. There's nothing wrong with that. One, he doesn't family money. Who knows how they break it up? Regardless, I see too many people like, oh, it's daddy's money. Who cares? Like Arthur Smith proved, it's not like his dad was in football. He was a good NFL coach as an offensive coordinator. Awful head coach. And this year was really embarrassing what they did with Desmond Ridder. But today was the icing on the cake. And getting back, Jameis is trying to be political. Jameis, good guy. Dennis Allen, if I was the Saints, we missed the playoffs. I clearly kind of like the guy. Today, you think Sean Payton would have walked up to Arthur Smith, even if he was mad at Jameis, and said, hey, man, I'm sorry? When Arthur Smith said that's effing BS, Sean Payton would have said, F you, kiss my ass. Because Arthur Smith, this is everyone's getting paid. If you can't stop me, quit, take your team into the locker room. This is not, there are no life lessons on Sunday. There's no, this is all about scoring as many points as you can, winning as big as you can, especially a guy like Dennis Allen who's trying to save his job. So Arthur Smith easily gets the loser of the week. That is such, I can't even overstate how just awful that is. If I was a Atlanta Falcons fan, I would want him gone so fast Monday morning. That's embarrassing that puts a stink on the franchise. That's what he did. He put a stink on the franchise. And last but not least, the Jags. I've been saying this about Caleb Williams forever. Hype is something that just grows on itself when it comes to athletics. Hell, it happens in the stock market. We've seen it happen with AI. It happens in all sorts of industries. It happens in politics. It's something that just gains momentum and can't slow down. And when it comes with prospects, once you hit a certain kind of threshold, there's no stopping it. Caleb got there like a year ago. It's like, oh, this guy's the number one pick. He's going to be the number one pick. Happened with Zion. Happened once upon a time, like LeBron's and Bryce Harper's. Some guys live up to it. Andrew Luck. Some guys like tank for Tua. Turns out, no, you shouldn't tank for Tua. You'd rather have Justin Herbert. And obviously Joe Burrow ahead of him, no brainer. The hype on Trevor Lawrence is some of the strongest, and this is not just media, this is from the NFL, we've ever seen. And he simply hasn't even come close to living up to it. Today, down the stretch of that game, he was horrendous. The game-ending incompletion was something you'd see like from a third-string quarterback. It wasn't even close. And I say this all the time because we're so quick. Well, what's he going to have to get paid? How much are you going to have to pay him? Who cares? You don't have to pay him yet. Brock Purdy, what are you going to have to do once you pay him? He's still got 2 years on his contract. What the hell's a rush? Like, Patrick Mahomes won an MVP and won a Super Bowl. Okay, I'll pay the guy. Do you think the Eagles wish they might have just played it out with Jalen Hurts? Would they have saved some money? And listen, I understand why they paid him, but everyone's always in a rush because if you pay him early and he continues to be sweet, you get a discount. Mahomes, Josh Allen. But if you hit some bumpy roads, it's an utter disaster. And to me, Trevor Lawrence right now, I'm not even offering you a contract. I'm picking up the fifth-year option. Like it played itself out. You're not getting a contract offer. You're under contract. I'm picking up your fifth-year option, and you will play out the fourth year. And if you ever want that huge money that a lot of these guys get, you better start winning some big-time games. You better start playing like the player that you were hyped to be, because right now it's not even remotely close. And you tell, the coaching, I'm just watching him. A guy can be open, and he skips the ball. Maybe he's injured, maybe he's not, but it's just not even remotely close to being good enough. And the Titans today, and the Vrabel thing is one of the more bizarre things out there because Titans clearly want him back. Feels like Vrabel doesn't want to be there. He's not going to get fired, but he might want to leave. I don't know. We'll see how this plays out over the next couple of days. He didn't want to lose today, and he had that team ready to go. And they hit the Jags directly square in the jaw. And the Jags folded. Like, that game felt over about midway through the game. Derrick Henry, who clearly just played his last game for the Titans, they gave him the mic after the game. He talked to the fans. He called it the greatest 8 years of his life. Honestly, he had one of the great 4 or 5 year runs and as a running back I've ever seen, especially in this modern era when no one runs it. But just an awesome player. He destroyed them today. Had 150 yards and was just manhandling them physically. And the one thing, if the Jags, obviously, if they ever want to be taken seriously, the quarterback has to play at a much higher level. And God, their team is soft. I mean, I'm glad they lost, though I don't think Pittsburgh deserved to get in with the Trubisky debacle this season. I did not want to watch the Jags again. I wanted them to go away. So props to the Titans for winning that game and allowing us to watch. I think Bills handled Pittsburgh, but that's, to me, just a better game for our viewing pleasures Sunday morning.